What do you think about friendships in your later years? As we grow older, we experience a variety of partings, farewells to longtime friends, changes in work relationships, distance from family, a feeling that creeps quietly into the back of our minds. It may be loneliness. Loneliness, especially as we get older, can cast a deep shadow over our hearts. Do you ever feel that you are going to be alone, or that you will be left behind? But the sages of ancient India found a very different meaning in this feeling of loneliness. The story we are about to tell you is the spiritual journey of a merchant. It is a story that shows us that the feeling of loneliness we fear may actually be the most precious gift in life. As you listen to this story, I want you to think about your own experiences and feelings. As you listen to this story, please reflect on your own experiences and feelings. And if you would like, please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments about how you dealt with your friendships in your later years. I am sure your words may resonate with someone and bring new insights. We'll be back with the story of a merchant named Deva, set in the ancient Indian city of Pataliputra. In the ancient Indian commercial city of Pataliputra lived a merchant named Deva. His store, dealing in silks and spices, was one of the most prosperous in town. At the age of 55, Deva had amassed a wealth and a solid reputation. He led a life as a merchant that everyone envied. The lively voices echoed through the marketplace. The lively voices of the marketplace. The eager negotiations of the passing merchants. The streets lined with colorful merchandise. Amidst the hustle and bustle, Deva's store had a special presence. At dusk, the merchants would naturally gather to talk about the day's business. Among them, he had a special bond with his childhood friend, Ananda. It seems you did a good business today. Oh, Ananda, thanks to you, I did well. We have a special wine tonight. Let's enjoy it together. Such casual conversations were part of their daily routine. Often, we would lose track of time as we talked about our families, our business concerns, and memories of our youth. However, their peaceful days were greatly shaken by Ananda's sudden death just 3 days after he fell ill with fever. The shortness of the time left a deep scar on Deva's heart. On the day of the funeral, as the smoke from the cremation on the banks of the Ganges River rose, Deva stood quietly as the setting sun reflected on the river's surface. The sunset reflected on the river, like a memory of Ananda, turned red and faded away. Will I never hear that laugh again? The words were not just a lament. The Ananda case was a turning point in Deva's life. It was also the realization that he was getting older too. As if to add insult to injury, longtime friends began to disappear one by one. Vishwa, a merchant, moved to distant Taxila. Ramesh, a textile merchant, fell ill. Prakash, a spice merchant, retired and moved to the countryside. The once bustling shopfronts at dusk are now only a lonely wind. The young merchants were adopting new business practices, using calculators and introducing new systems of trading. The traditional business practices of the Devas were gradually considered outdated. One day, noticing that the merchants, who had been regulars, were no longer visiting the store, his son Rabbi said to him, "Father, why don't we try a few more new ways of doing things?" Deva replied, "Yes," but his heart was heavy. Feeling crushed by his loneliness, Deva desperately sought new friendships. He attended a gathering of young merchants and tried to learn how to use the popular calculator. However, the young men looked uncomfortable when they saw Deva. Puzzled by the complicated operation of the machine, he began to actively participate in the festivities at the temple and joined the people meditating in front of a pond of lotus flowers. But the serenity made him uncomfortable. Even at the market, he forgot his former dignity and waited for an opportunity to speak to someone. "Mr. Deva, have you been well? Mr. Deva, how are you?" Though someone may speak to me, the relationship is superficial and does nothing to quench the dryness in my heart. In fact, these interactions only accentuated the emptiness of the relationship. "Father, you don't have to force yourself to associate with young people." Priya, the daughter, had noticed something unusual about her father. At dinner, seeing Deva's reluctance to eat, she gently reminded him, "Father, you don't have to be with young people. The way you do business has a flavor that young people cannot imitate, and it is that flavor that is important." But Deva's mind remained unsettled. The feeling of being left behind, the anxiety of not being able to keep up with the times, and most of all, the loneliness of losing someone he could trust to talk to, weighed heavily on him day by day. One sunny afternoon, Diva went for a walk in the woods in the suburbs to take her mind off things, but she got lost. And when she couldn't find her way back, surrounded by unfamiliar trees, she found a store with a strange calmness. There he met a white-haired ascetic named Sanghamitra. Davis later learned that he was one of Buddha's disciples. Sanghamitra invited Diva into the store with a gentle smile, as if he had been waiting for him to come. "You have a deep hesitation in your eyes." At these words, Diva began to speak as if he had been weighed down. At these words, Diva began to speak as if in a dam. He spoke of his memories of Ananda, of lost friendships, of the disconnect with the younger generation, and above all, of the fear of loneliness that consumed his heart. Sanghamitra just listened quietly. As night fell, a small light in front of the store reflected their shadows on the wall. Eventually, Sanghamitra began to speak quietly. "We are all born alone, and we all die alone. It is an inescapable truth. But we need not fear that loneliness, because it is our gift. Because it is a gift given to us." "A gift?" Diva's voice was laced with confusion. "Yes. Solitude is a precious opportunity to face ourselves and find inner peace. The death of your good friend Ananda may in fact offer an important lesson." That night, Diva learned how to meditate from Sanghamitra. He said, "Just be aware of your breath, and just observe the thoughts that come to your mind. It is like watching the flow of a river." The first few days of meditation, Diva felt restless. His mind constantly wandered back and forth between memories of the past and fears about the future. And it was painful to sit quietly. But as he continued to meditate each morning, at sunrise, little by little things began to change. One morning, while sweeping the front of his store, Diva stopped in his tracks. One morning, while sweeping in front of his shop, Diva paused and saw lotus flowers drenched in morning dew, shining with a beauty he had never seen before. The hustle and bustle of the market was no longer bothersome, but sounded like life-giving music, and the biggest change was in how he dealt with solitude. Alone time, which he had feared, was now an important opportunity to prepare his mind. The quiet time, spent on the porch of the store at dusk with a cup of tea, had become the richest part of Diva's day. At times, memories of his time with Ananda would come to the forefront of his mind. But it no longer felt like suffering, but like a precious pattern woven into the fabric of life. "Diva, you have changed recently," one of our regular customers told us. Indeed, Diva's face was filled with a calm light. Unlike the days when he was desperately seeking relationships with people, he was now interacting with them in a natural way. More and more young merchants were coming to the restaurant to ask for business advice. Diva forgot his former impatience and simply listened quietly to their stories. Sometimes he passed on the wisdom of the old ways of doing business, and sometimes he was interested in their new ideas. Through such interactions, an understanding that transcended generations naturally developed. One evening at dinner, Priya spoke softly to Diva. Diva smiled gently back. "I don't know. I just feel like I finally found my place." In the small square in front of the store, a crowd of distressed people had gathered, merchants, artisans, and young people. Among them were those who, like Diva in the past, were suffering from loneliness. Sanghamitra, with his usual calm expression, told Diva, "You have understood," he said. "You have understood that loneliness is never the enemy, but rather a guide that leads us to deeper awareness. And now your image is also a guide for new people." Diva nodded deeply. He felt that the death of his former best friend, Ananda, had thus brought him to a new place. Now even the memory of Ananda was shining as a gentle light in his heart. This story gives us a profound insight into how to deal with loneliness. In life, there will always be times of separation from loved ones and loneliness due to changes in relationships, but loneliness can be the path that leads us to true fulfillment. As Diva discovered, inner peace may come not only from our relationships with others, but also from a deep dialogue with ourselves. And this realization will eventually lead us to richer relationships with ourselves. Loneliness is never an end, but may be the door to a new beginning. Thank you for watching to the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you like. Let's continue to adopt Buddha's wisdom and make our lives more radiant and happy.